Kam Redlawsk is a testament to the power of perseverance and the beauty of embracing one's unique journey. A wanderer by nature, she traverses the world, soaking in its diversity and infusing its essence into her art that vividly portrays her experiences, her struggles, and her triumphs. Beneath the surface of her vibrant creations lies a poignant truth, a truth shaped by the relentless grasp of GNE Myopathy, a rare and degenerative muscle-wasting disorder that has gripped Kam's life since the age of 17. Through her art and her words, Kam seeks to transcend the limitations imposed by her condition, offering a glimpse into the depths of the human spirit and the power of expression. Where incredible artistry and commitment to accessibility meet, there you will find the incredible talent of Kam Redlawsk. Thank you so much, Kam Redlawsk, for joining me here on AwareNow to share this space and to share your story. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with this. Your words. Immobility is unlike any silence I've ever heard. You shared this in a post that you did alongside one of my many favorite illustrations of yours, this specific one entitled Overcome. Can you share your thoughts on immobility as it pertains to silence?
So it's interesting, as my muscle wasting disease has allowed me to experience many different stages of disability. I've found that there is this weird surrounding silence that has grown around me as I've progressed and as my body has become more immobile. And it can breed a form of disconnect and loneliness, feeling like you're not a physical participant. I think we've all experienced this, of being in a crowded room and feeling like you're screaming but no one hears you. It can feel like that in a little bit of a way because you're just so different than everyone, for one. And there's a lot of unspoken not understanding of someone that is immobile or disabled. And there can be some fear or hesitant around that. And I can always feel it. And in so many ways, it feels like it's the responsibility is on me to make everyone else more comfortable, which is another form of like just adding to that sense of loneliness because I'm the one experiencing it. But with immobility, there's a feeling of like, we don't realize mobility is a form of a voice. And when you lose it, you feel a little bit voiceless. It can make you feel invisible. It can make you feel strangled. It can make you just like when I'm sitting there watching someone doing something as simple as like washing dishes or opening the car door, putting on the seatbelt. There's like definitely a disconnect and a loneliness and a rumination in my mind of just remembering myself doing those exact same things because I so want to do those, just the very simple and mundane, and trying to collect any memories of remembering how to do something that's just so simple, which can be infuriating. But I also shared that silence is also doesn't have to be a negative thing. There's also, I think, and a lot of, in general, but with my disabled experience, there's a duality of both good and bad that has come from the disability. So silence has been a good thing where it's afforded me the imagination, where as I progressed, my mind has become much more imaginative, and I live a lot of my life in my mind because I have so much time. I'm just sitting there and waiting a lot of time for people to help me, or just sitting there waiting or watching other people move and have mobility. So it's afforded me a lot of extra time where all of that time is in my head, and I'm able to have an imagination and form observations and patterns and human behavior and things like that. So that's a kind of a unique silence as well that has come about, the part of silence that I am grateful for.
And I love that, speaking of the duality of it, the blessing and the curse of it, right? I'd like to discuss another favorite piece of mine from your collection, and it's called Ponytail. And I ordered this print of yours, and it resides in my office, actually here above my computer.
Aww.
And I look at it often to be reminded and to reflect. So for those unfamiliar with this piece, it's a really awesome story. Could you please share that?
So the illustration really is built around a very simple act of putting your hair in a ponytail, and something I used to always do as a kid and growing up. And at this stage that I drew ponytail, my arms and my hands and my fingers were starting to weaken. And so putting my hair up in a ponytail was suddenly noticeably challenging. And it just reminded me, it was kind of like the beginning of like big things were, weakening, like walking or standing and things like that. But these were now little things that were starting to happen. Whereas something as mundane as putting your hair in a ponytail was becoming this big challenge. So I drew it. I imagined myself as a situation, as myself as a woman, as a profile of a woman. And I drew her as an illustration as like a hill or a mountain, something to surmount, to get up to. And in a lot of my, especially my older illustrations, there's another duality of a little girl and a woman, typically in my drawings, and the little woman and the adult woman are both me. And it's something that I think that I've always been aware of since I was a kid, watching parents or adults as they've suddenly, when they get in their 40s, they change, they challenge themselves less, they have less passion or follow their dreams less. And it was a fine line that I was always very aware of. And I think this is what the little girl and the big and the woman is always reflecting on is, we have this span of time or these difficulties or these struggles that kind of dilute who we are and what we're willing to do, or how we're willing to really be there for ourselves. And so a lot of the times in these illustrations, this duality, the little girl is typically pleading with the adult woman to not forget herself. So that's where it comes from. So the little girl is climbing up her hair of a mountain that is a mountain, trying to get back to herself, to remind herself that the struggle is difficult, but she can do it. And that as she's going up this mountain, she passes a lot of like clocks and stopwatches and things that are the reminder of time and how little we have of it, and representative of a progressive disability that is constantly changing what you're able to do. So it was a very simple moment, but to me, I made an illustration because I thought it was very indicative of just, magnifying this small thing to really give insight and understanding of what someone that is living with a disability or a chronic illness and experiencing grief and loss and what that feels like.
It's a phenomenal piece, and the depth that's there is just, it's amazing. And so I love the stories behind your art, and on occasion the food as well, because there is a piece of yours, kimchi nostalgia, that I love. Will you talk about your first experience with kimchi, and specifically about the whisper that you heard?
I'm an adoptee, and I grew up in a white family, which meant I have a very little experience growing up with Korean food until I went to college, which happened to have a high amount of Korean international students there. So that's when I really began being exposed to my Korean culture. But when I was about 10 years old or so, I had a little experience because my father, who was in the military, we all went on a family road trip to Kentucky to meet one of his military friends. And his wife was Korean, and he had 2 sons who were Korean. So she was super excited to meet me. She made her own homemade kimchi. She made all her own food. And she kind of took me under her wing as kind of like a project to like, I'm going to show Kam a few little basic Korean foods. So she took me to the commissary. It was the first time I saw like all these options of spicy Korean ramens, and I'd never known there was anything beyond chicken ramen, which is what a lot of Americans grow up with. And she took me home and she set up a little Korean ground table and made me some rice and homemade kimchi and some egg rolls and some Korean ramen. And I just remember, it was something that I hadn't known about at the time, but much later in adult life, I learned about olfactory memory and the fact that our smells and odors can unearth so many memories that we didn't know we had. There's so much inside of us that we don't know that it's there subconsciously, but it's there. So just that little exchange with the kimchi and smelling it, because it's very strong and pungent, it didn't really bring about a specific memory. It just brought about like a sense, like a feeling of like, Oh, there I am. I was always there. I had a life before this life here in America, before this life with my family right now. There is a part of me that's still in Korea. So that was kind of like a really cool thing to experience at 10 years old. And then much later in life, I got to really kind of explore my Korean culture.
It's such an awesome story, and I think it's something that all of us can identify with, and that because there are specific smells that will take you to a moment, that will take you to a space, or just give you a feeling or a sense of one thing or another. Something definitely you could get lost in. And I find myself getting very lost, enjoyably lost, and at the same time, beautifully found in exploring your illustrations, Kam. I'm eager to get lost and found in your upcoming picture book. I'd love to talk now about Monster and Me. I cannot wait. Please describe the relationship that you have with the monster that you bring to life in your illustrations.
So yes, I've just completed my very first picture book as the author and illustrator, and the working title is Monster Me, but the final title is going to be different. And it's inspired by my rare disease and disability, and it's going to be out hopefully by this autumn. And what it's really about is, again, from a single moment that actually happened years ago when I was still walking with the cane and leg braces, and I had fallen, and at this time I wasn't able to get myself up after I fell. So my husband, who worked an hour away, we were living in San Francisco at the time, he had to come help and get me up because we didn't know anybody. So here I am, I'm just laying there for an hour, which gave me a lot of time for my imagination and thinking. And I had suddenly saw a huge gray furry foot peek out from the corner of my doorway. And I immediately thought, he's the reason why I'm always struggling and falling. So basically I had personified my struggle, my situation, my disability as this forlorn monster. And I drew, when my husband got me up, I immediately drew a little illustration of me and him in these kind of little bit creepy forest. And he's hiding behind a tree, and I'm just like, look, disinterested and sad at his, presence. And he looks sad at the fact that I'm disinterested. So what the monster really represented is my rare disease, my disability that follows me around everywhere. And in the beginning of the story, she's just upset, like, why are you here? Why are you with me? And he's just a sweet little, unharmful monster who doesn't know why I'm so upset, but all he knows is his purpose is to be with me. So soon I realized, okay, this guy isn't leaving, and it's my job to form this journey to acceptance with him. And so that's what it really is about, is it's expressing something that I think is really important for a lot of people, not just disabled people. And how do we accept the shadows on our walls, the struggles that follow us? And I found that these days, disability advocacy is mostly focused on empowerment and societal burial advocacy. But what I like to also do is talk about the realities of disability that a lot of people don't want to talk about, I think, is because it's very vulnerable. And I think in a way, it's also a reaction to not wanting to be pitied. So if I'm sharing a true vulnerable moment that this is difficult or sad or scary or grief-stricken, that might make a disability look like it's horrific, and who wants to be disabled, right? But I think it's important because there's a lot of people who have just become disabled or have been disabled for years or decades and still on the journey to acceptance, and they just can't quite get there. So in me being always empowered online, it's not honest, and it's not helping other disabled people who are looking at that and saying, oh, well, she's just great. She loves disability all the time. What's my problem? So that's why the other half of my advocacy largely is built around this idea of acceptance and how do we deal with the emotions and stuff that circulate around this thing. And Monster Me is pretty much epitomizes that. And I'm just so excited to share that with everyone, but especially with my fellow disabled and chronic illness, spoony, rare disease peeps around the world. So yeah.
Well, please, the moment it is available for pre-sale, please just let us know.
For sure.
We cannot wait. So not only do you use your illustrations to communicate and connect with others, but you use your words. And so we're going to switch gears a bit, because there was a recent blog post that really struck me, and you shared these words. For me, breaking the glass ceiling is not about breaking it for yourself. It's about making sure equality and equity exists for all. Because it's not breaking glass ceilings when your shards are killing everyone underneath you. I felt like this piece that you published on International Women's Day was so profound. In this post, you also shared the fact that you've been called a traitor by other women and by members of your own party for calling out inconvenient truths. So I guess my question in all of this is, what keeps you motivated to keep calling out these truths?
So first, on International Women's Day, I posted a post that was not so platitude and women. It was more getting to the point of one specific issue, and that's war. And not many people know this, but I'm very much into sociopolitics. I've studied it for over a decade, very deeply, specifically foreign policy. I'm really into the analytical side of it, of looking at patterns and systems that also intersect with human behavior and motivation. So I think that's really interesting to me. I think so much of the basics of humans, even though foreign policy or politics seems complicated, the basics of human capabilities show up in that. So it's really interesting to me. On Women's Day, I posted about war because it's something I'm very much against. And I get a little bit tired of the social platitudes from people who are in power. Normally, when I speak on this stuff, I'm always speaking at people in power. People in power who talk about feminism and pro-democracy, and yet I know exactly what their true policy history and leadership history was, in particular with foreign policy. So for me, we're in this incredibly important time of identity and awareness in identity, and understanding how much identity has not been varied throughout our media and systems of power and leadership and all that. So 100,000% I'm always for identity politics when it's about diversifying any space, but we're talking about with leadership right now, diversifying leadership with women, people of color, more than what has the typical identity that has held power for centuries, right? But I'm very much against exceptionalism. I think exceptionalism is deeply dangerous and keeps truth in the dark. And not to mention, it creates a lot of harmful business as usual. So what I found is a lot of power structures and corporations have realized, well, identity is very important to us. It's the thing right now that we're talking about. So they exploit identity to be able to traverse the system uncensored, unaccountable. Don't look at me. I'm the same minority as you. I'm a woman, so I'm doing everything I can for a woman. And thus, it's created a lot of people that don't look at their own side. In general, it's always been like that because we are in a duopoly of partisan politics of two sides that are completely opposite, and we've been taught to basically never evaluate or hold our own side accountable and only look at the other side in anger. So what I found was during this time when I was doing really long, lengthy political essays and talking about this exceptionalism and more or less talking more about the structure and systemic side of politics rather than sides, because I just feel like talking about sides and parties does very little work. All it does is collect the same people who believe in you and then believe in the same, and then both sides just argue to the nth degree. What I found is power uses identity now to install or circumvent accountability. And I know of some of these minorities that were in power, whether it was in foreign policy or whether it was Congress voting for every war because they've never met a war they didn't like, whether it's a POTUS who is a minority, it doesn't matter. What I found is they've all done business as usual. So when I was talking about these inconvenient truths about the entire system and not just one side, my own party would call me a traitor for even calling out anything that my own side is doing. And if it was a woman that I was quote unquote criticizing, or really just stating facts, because I try not to get personal, it's all about facts, they would tell me that I hated women. I hated women. And it was just really disheartening and frustrating and a little crushing, because I certainly don't hate women. I'm all about supporting women. But I also don't think that a woman dropping bombs or doing warmongering or overthrowing democratically elected governments in foreign countries and installing brutal conservative regimes that murder women and set back rights for women is not feminism. To me, that's selective justice. So in that post that I did, it was really built around that thing. And I think I've been harboring that for a while, feeling being called a traitor and a woman hater just because I spoke inconvenient truths of crimes against humanity. When installing someone who is a minority, who is doing a lot of the same, doesn't do anything to help the minority, they're allegedly saying therefore it only does, the same. It only continues the same cycle. So a child and a mom overseas being bombed, it's no better for them if it was by a white man or if it's by a woman or a person of color or by anyone. It doesn't matter. So that's the main feeling that I feel is my ideology. I'm very proud of my identity. I'm very proud of all these things, but I try to do my best to remove my identity and allegiance to institutions when it comes to what's right, what's humane. Because my only ideology in those instances is what's true, what's right, and what's humane. And I think we make a lot of excuses for certain identities that do the same just because they're our own identity.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There's a long response.
I love that. And I feel like I love it. And I feel like it should be, I pledge allegiance to humanity, right? And
yes.
We have to be able to get there. I guess this last question I have for you today is, what do you hope people take, keep, and share most about the work that you do, Kam?
So while I talk about disability and societal barrier advocacy, I think the larger umbrella is talking about the human condition. And I think that's what's important. What I found with disability, if I really want people to understand disability, I have to be willing to share myself vulnerably and be honest about it. And more so, I want to talk about the emotions behind it and the process and the emotional journey, because that's something that we all can relate to. I think we spend a lot of time focusing on how we're different. And I think these differences just can cause ignorance and fear. And for me, when I talk about the human condition, it's about reminding people that we all may seem very different from each other, but we experience the same origins, the same types of basic human emotions. That if we can understand that, then maybe we speak different languages or have different experiences, but we can at least understand that we're all the same. We're all experiencing very similar struggles, and maybe not the same struggle, but similar in terms of the emotions that it evokes. So I think that's what's really important for me, for people to really take away from my sharing, and just understanding the humanization of others as well as ourselves. And the importance of talking about our emotions, because I think a lot of us think emotions is a woman thing, but it's a human thing, and it's very much the origin of all our behavior and motivation. So if we don't understand it, then we are at risk at spewing all of that onto everyone else around us in negative ways, and often negative ways, or onto ourselves. So for me, it's just really important for people to understand and feel comfortable with that. It's okay to confront your emotions, and you have to in order to really proceed in life. And that we are all just going through it, and to have some empathy for each other. And then, the last thing is really living your life, because that's the biggest thing I've learned from a progressive disease that threatens to completely change my physical ability and life, is to know that, well, I have this time, and that's the time to live and not later. So I've been given the opportunity or fortune to at least know that, or been told that through a very physical manifestation of my life. But not everyone knows that. Even though we all know we're going to die, not everyone remembers that, and we just wait to live later. Oh, I'll do it later. And there is no later. So I think those are the main things.
Thank you, Kam, for sharing your story, for sharing your art, for helping all of us become a bit more aware now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was great talking with you.